What if the distance you thought was destroying the connection was actually revealing the truth about it? What if the silence you are experiencing right now is not the end of the story, but the moment when everything that was buried begins to rise? Listen carefully, because this is where most people lose their power. They think when someone pulls away, they have to chase harder. They have to explain more. They have to prove their worth. They have to send another message, make another call, reopen another conversation, somehow convince that person not to leave. No, there comes a moment in your life when you must stop fighting for someone to recognize what you brought into their life and start recognizing it yourself. Because sometimes an avoidant person believes distance makes them stronger. They believe if they create enough space, they can silence the emotions. They believe if they become cold enough, busy enough, detached enough, they will no longer feel the attachment. But here is the paradox of human emotion. What you refuse to process does not automatically disappear. Sometimes it gets louder in the silence. When you were there, they could distract themselves with your presence. They could become accustomed to your attention. They could receive your affection without fully understanding its value. They could assume you would always be there because you kept showing up. But when you stop showing up, something changes. The external noise becomes quieter. And in that quiet, memory speaks. They remember your voice. They remember the conversations. They remember the way you cared. They remember the moments they dismissed because they assumed there would always be another one. And suddenly, the person who thought distance would make them feel nothing begins to discover that distance can make certain feelings impossible to ignore. But understand this, your mission is not to make them miss you. Your mission is to become free. There is a massive difference. If you disappeared just to trigger a reaction, you are still emotionally attached to their response. You are still waiting. You are still checking. You are still measuring your worth by whether they come back. That is not freedom. Freedom is when you say, I love deeply, but I will not abandon myself to be loved. I care, but I will not beg. I remember, but I will not live in the past. I am open to what is meant for me, but I refuse to chase what continually runs away from me. That is strength. And sometimes the greatest transformation begins when you stop trying to control another person's heart and start mastering your own. You cannot control whether someone misses you. You cannot control when they realize your value. You cannot control whether they return, but you can control what you become while they are gone. You can build yourself, you can heal, you can strengthen your mind, you can reconnect with your purpose, you can become disciplined, you can stop negotiating against your own dignity, you can wake up every morning and ask, what can I create today? Who can I become today? What gift has been placed inside me that I have not yet fully expressed? Because your life was never supposed to be placed on pause because somebody else became emotionally unavailable. Your destiny is bigger than somebody else's avoidance. Your purpose is bigger than somebody else's confusion. Your future is bigger than somebody else's inability to communicate what they feel. And maybe this separation is not punishment. Maybe it is preparation. Maybe the distance is teaching you something you could not learn while you were constantly trying to hold everything together. Maybe you needed to discover that your peace cannot depend on another person's consistency. Maybe you needed to understand that love without self-respect becomes self-abandonment. Maybe you needed to learn that sometimes letting go is not giving up. Sometimes letting go is giving God, life, and reality room to reveal what is true. Think about it. When you stop chasing someone, you don't necessarily lose them. You simply stop carrying the entire relationship on your shoulders. And now something important happens. They have to make a choice. They have to confront their own feelings. They have to decide whether the connection mattered. They have to experience what life feels like without your constant availability. And that is where distance can become powerful. Not because you are manipulating them, but because you are no longer protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. If they miss you, let them miss you. If they remember you, let them remember. If they realize your value, let that realization come naturally, but don't stand at the door of your future waiting for someone to knock. Walk forward, build, grow, become. Because there is something extraordinary that happens when you stop trying to be chosen and start choosing yourself. Your energy changes, your posture changes, your decisions change. You stop asking, why don't they want me? And you start asking, why did I ever believe their inability to receive me determined my worth? That's the question. Because another person's emotional limitations are not a measurement of your value. Someone can be unable to handle intimacy and still recognize your worth. Someone can care about you and still be afraid of closeness. Someone can miss you and still struggle to return. Human beings are complicated. That is why your peace cannot depend upon decoding every silence. You don't need to understand every reason someone walked away before you are allowed to walk forward. You don't need their apology before you begin healing. You don't need their confession before you believe that what you experienced mattered. And you certainly don't need their return before you start living again. There is a divine principle here. What is meant to grow must be nourished by truth, not sustained by fear. If someone returns, let them return with clarity, let them return with effort, let them return with accountability. Let them return because they are ready to build something healthier, not because they are temporarily lonely. And if they never return, you still win because you found yourself, you found your strength, you found your direction. You found the version of yourself that existed before you made another person's attention the center of your emotional universe. That is the victory. So don't be afraid of the silence. Don't panic because they became distant. Don't assume their coldness means they never cared. And don't assume their eventual missing means you must immediately run back. Let reality reveal itself. You have something far more important to do. You have a life to build. You have dreams to pursue. You have wounds to heal. You have gifts to develop. You have people to serve. You have a future that is waiting for you. And every day you spend obsessing over whether somebody misses you is a day you could have spent becoming unforgettable to yourself. Ride that again in your heart. Become unforgettable to yourself. Become the person you respect when you look in the mirror. Become the person who keeps promises to yourself. Become the person who no longer begs for crumbs because you finally understand that you were created for abundance. And if one day that person looks back and realizes what they lost, that's their journey. If they miss you, that's their feeling. If they return, that's their decision. But your decision is already made. You choose peace. You choose growth. You choose purpose. You choose faith. You choose yourself. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't that someone comes back. Sometimes the miracle is that you no longer need them to. And when you reach that place, something beautiful happens. You stop living from fear. You stop waiting for a notification. You stop analyzing every song, every post, every silence, every memory. You breathe again. You laugh again. You dream again. You become alive again. And then you realize something powerful. Their distance didn't make you weaker. It gave you space to become stronger. Their silence didn't destroy you. It taught you how to hear your own voice. Their absence didn't erase your worth. It revealed that your worth was never dependent on their presence. So let them have their distance. Let them have their process. Let them face whatever they have been avoiding. And you keep moving, not to make them jealous, not to make them regret leaving, not to prove that you can live without them. Move because your life is calling you forward. Move because you were not placed on this earth to spend your precious energy convincing someone to recognize your value. Move because there is more ahead of you than what is behind you. And trust that what belongs in your life will not require you to destroy yourself to keep it. The right love will meet you with effort. The right connection will make room for vulnerability. The right person will not require you to become smaller so they can feel comfortable. And until that happens, keep becoming, keep healing, keep building, keep believing. Because the moment you stop chasing what keeps running away, you create room for everything that is actually capable of staying. And perhaps one day, the person who thought distance would make them stronger will finally understand that distance did not erase you. It gave them enough silence to hear what they were trying so desperately not to feel. But by then, you may have become someone different, not colder, not bitter, not heartless, just stronger, wiser, more peaceful, more grounded. And if they return, you won't receive them from desperation. You'll receive them from discernment. You'll ask not, do they miss me? You'll ask, can they meet me where I am now? That's the transformation. That's the power. That's the freedom. So tonight, release the need to know what they are thinking. Release the need to predict when they will miss you. Release the need to force an outcome. Put your attention back where your power has always been, in your own hands. Your story is not over. Your love story is not your entire story. There is a purpose beyond this pain. There is growth beyond this separation. There's a version of you beyond this heartbreak that you have not met yet. Go meet that person, build that person, become that person. And trust that when you become aligned with your purpose, what is truly meant for you will find its way into your life, not through manipulation, not through chasing, not through fear, but through truth. Let them experience your absence. But more importantly, let yourself experience your presence, because the greatest person you can ever come back to is yourself. Sometimes a person walks away believing that distance is going to make them stronger. They tell themselves, I don't need this. I don't need them. I can handle this on my own. They create space, shut down emotionally, become colder, and convince themselves that detachment is the same thing as strength. But there is a difference between controlling your emotions and healing your emotions. There is a difference between being peaceful and simply being disconnected. When someone avoids emotional closeness, distance can initially feel powerful because it removes the pressure of vulnerability. There is no difficult conversation, no emotional responsibility, no need to explain what is happening inside. They can stay busy, distract themselves, focus on work, entertainment, friends, or anything else that keeps them from sitting quietly with their thoughts. But silence has a way of exposing what noise was covering. When the distractions disappear, memories begin to surface. A familiar song can suddenly bring someone back to a moment. A place can remind them of a conversation. A random thought can bring back the feeling of being understood, supported, or loved. And suddenly, the person who believed they were becoming stronger through distance realizes that they may simply have been postponing an emotional confrontation. That is the paradox. You can run from a feeling, but running does not guarantee that the feeling disappears. Sometimes it follows you into the silence. And this is where you need to understand something important. You cannot control what another person eventually realizes. You cannot force somebody to miss you. You cannot manipulate their emotions by disappearing, but you can stop participating in the cycle that allows another person to avoid their own feelings while you carry all the emotional weight. If you are always reaching out, always checking in, always explaining, always trying to repair the connection, you may unintentionally give them a way to remain distracted from their own emotional responsibility. They never have to sit with the consequences of distance because you keep filling the space they created. But when you step back, not as punishment, not as revenge, but as self-respect, the dynamic changes. Now there is silence. And silence can become a mirror. They may begin to notice what your presence added to their life. They may recognize the comfort they took for granted. They may remember how consistently you showed up. They may discover that what they called space also created an emptiness they were not prepared to feel. But here's the deeper lesson for you. Do not make your life about whether they miss you. Make your life about becoming someone you are proud to be, because if your entire healing process depends on their regret, then you are still giving them control over your emotional world. Your power begins when you say, I don't need to know what they are feeling today. I need to know what I am building today. That is strength. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't manipulate. You don't try to force a reaction. You simply step back, return your attention to yourself, and allow reality to reveal what distance truly means. Maybe they will miss you. Maybe they will realize what they lost. Maybe they will return with greater clarity, or maybe they won't. But either way, you are no longer standing still. You are becoming stronger for a reason that has nothing to do with whether they come back. And sometimes that is exactly when you discover that the distance that once felt like rejection became the space where you finally found yourself. There comes a moment when you have to understand that constantly chasing someone does not create genuine connection. Sometimes it only creates an environment where the other person never has to confront what they truly feel. As long as you keep reaching out, explaining, checking in, forgiving, and trying to repair everything by yourself, they can remain comfortable in their distance. They know you are still there. They know you are still thinking about them. They know another message may arrive. And because of that, they may never experience the full reality of your absence. But when you stop chasing, something changes. The silence becomes real. For once, they have to sit with their own thoughts instead of being distracted by your constant effort. They may begin asking questions they previously avoided. Why haven't they contacted me? Why does their silence feel different? Why am I thinking about them now? Did I actually want them gone, or was I simply afraid of getting too close? You cannot answer those questions for them, and you shouldn't. Their emotional journey belongs to them. Your responsibility is to stop abandoning yourself in the attempt to keep someone else emotionally comfortable. Sometimes you think you are proving your love by pursuing someone who keeps pulling away. You believe that if you just explain yourself one more time, if you show them how much you care, if you give them enough patience, they will finally understand. But love is not supposed to require you to repeatedly prove your worth. There is a point where persistence becomes self-neglect. There is a point where patience becomes waiting without purpose. There is a point where giving becomes giving away pieces of yourself. And that is where you must make a decision. You must decide that you can love someone without chasing them. You can care without begging. You can miss someone without contacting them. You can wish someone well without standing at the door of their life waiting for permission to enter. That is emotional maturity. When you stop chasing, you are not trying to manipulate the other person into missing you. You are simply removing yourself from a one-sided cycle. You are saying, I have expressed what I feel. I have shown what I am willing to give. Now the next move is not mine. And that creates something powerful, responsibility. If they care, they must eventually decide what they are going to do about it. If they miss you, they must decide whether they are willing to communicate. If they recognize your value, they must decide whether they are willing to demonstrate it through action. Words are easy, feelings are easy to hide, but action reveals intention. And while they are facing those questions, you have another responsibility. Face yourself. Ask yourself why you were willing to chase someone who was running. Ask yourself why their distance made you question your worth. Ask yourself why their attention became more important than your peace. Then begin rebuilding. Wake up with purpose. Take care of your mind. Strengthen your discipline. Reconnect with the people who genuinely value you. Work toward the dreams you temporarily abandoned. Because the goal is not to make them panic because you disappeared. The goal is to become so grounded that you no longer need to manipulate anyone into staying. And perhaps the most powerful realization is this. Sometimes people understand your value only after your constant presence is no longer available, but whether they realize it or not, your value remains unchanged. You don't become valuable because someone misses you. You were valuable before they met you. You were valuable while they were beside you, and you remain valuable while they are gone. So stop chasing what requires you to constantly prove that you deserve to be chosen. Step back, breathe, trust. Let people reveal themselves through their actions, and let your own actions reveal something even more important, that you have finally decided to choose yourself. Sometimes people do not fully understand the value of your presence while you are standing right in front of them. Not because you were not valuable, but because familiarity can make extraordinary things feel ordinary. When someone knows you are always available, always responding, always caring, and always willing to give another chance, they can begin to believe that your presence is permanent. They stop noticing the little things because they assume those little things will always be there. Then you become absent. And suddenly, What was familiar becomes noticeable. That is why absence can be powerful. It creates contrast. When your presence was constant, they may not have recognized how much emotional space you occupied in their life. But when that space becomes empty, they may begin noticing the difference. The conversation is gone. The messages are gone. The reassurance is gone. The person who used to ask how their day was is no longer asking. The person who remembered the little details is no longer there to remember them. And sometimes it is only when the noise stops that someone finally hears the silence. But understand this carefully. Absence is not a game. You should never disappear simply to manipulate someone into chasing you. That keeps you emotionally connected to their reaction. Real detachment is different. Real detachment says, I am stepping back because I need peace. I am no longer going to force what is not flowing naturally. I am going to allow life to reveal the truth. And when you do that, something interesting can happen. The person who once felt comfortable with distance may begin to experience the emotional weight of that distance. They may remember moments you shared. They may revisit conversations. They may compare the connection they had with you to the connections they experience elsewhere. They may realize that the attention they once considered ordinary was actually rare. They may discover that not everyone offers patience, loyalty, understanding, or emotional depth in the same way. But here is the lesson you must carry with you. You do not need to make someone miss you in order to prove that you mattered. Your worth does not begin when your absence becomes painful to someone else. Your worth existed before they recognized it. Sometimes people appreciate something only after losing access to it. That is part of human nature. But you cannot spend your life waiting for someone else's realization. Your job is to live lives so fully that your days are not organized around someone else's silence. Build your future, strengthen your mind, protect your peace, law again, dream again, become curious about life again. Because the greatest mistake you can make is turning your absence into another form of waiting. You stop texting them, but you spend every hour checking whether they texted you. You stop calling, but you constantly look at your phone. You stop pursuing, but you secretly hope every social media post will make them jealous. That is not freedom. That is pursuit wearing a different disguise. True freedom happens when you stop measuring your progress by their reaction. If they miss you, let them. If they remember you, let them. If they realize your value, let that realization belong to them. Your responsibility is to keep moving forward. Sometimes your absence may reveal what your presence allowed them to ignore. Sometimes it may awaken memories they thought they had buried. Sometimes it may make them question choices they once felt certain about. But whatever happens, don't abandon your journey, because perhaps the greatest purpose of your absence was never to make them miss you. Perhaps it was to make you realize how much of yourself you had been neglecting while trying to remain present in someone else's life. And that realization can change everything. You begin to understand that love should add to your life, not consume it. You begin to understand that connection should not require constant anxiety. You begin to understand that being wanted is beautiful, but being at peace is essential. So let your absence speak without forcing it to say anything. Let silence reveal what words could not. Let time expose what temporary emotions concealed. And most importantly, let yourself grow through the space, because when you stop trying to control whether someone misses you, you finally become available for something greater, a life where your happiness no longer depends on someone else's presence. There is a moment after emotional pain when you have a choice. You can spend your energy trying to make someone regret losing you, or you can use that same energy to rebuild the person you were always meant to become. One path keeps you connected to the past. The other creates a future. And if someone has pulled away from you, the strongest response is not revenge. It is transformation. You do not need to post things designed to make them jealous. You do not need to pretend you are happier than you are. You do not need to disappear just to make them wonder where you went. You do not need to become cold because they became cold. Why? Because revenge still makes them the center of your life. If every decision you make is designed to create a reaction in them, they still have power over you. You may look stronger from the outside, but internally you are still waiting for their attention. Real strength begins when you stop asking, how can I make them miss me? And start asking, how can I become the strongest, healthiest, most purposeful version of myself? That question changes everything. Now your morning has meaning. You begin investing in your body. You strengthen your mind. You become disciplined with your time. You return to your goals. You reconnect with people who genuinely care about you. You stop obsessively checking your phone and start building something that exists beyond someone else's approval. This is transformation. And transformation is powerful because it does not depend on whether they return. Maybe one day they notice your change. Maybe they realize that the person they walked away from is no longer standing in the same emotional place. Maybe they become curious. Maybe they miss you. Maybe they even regret certain choices. But by then, something inside you has changed. You are no longer desperate for their reaction. You are no longer thinking, I need them to see what they lost. You are thinking, I finally see what I almost lost myself. That is the victory. Sometimes we become so focused on someone else's absence that we forget our own presence. We forget our dreams. We forget our standards. We forget the person we were before the relationship became the center of our emotional world. But life is too precious to spend endlessly proving your worth to someone who is uncertain about it. You were not created merely to be someone's option. You were not created to chase someone into loving you. You were created to grow, contribute, love deeply, serve meaningfully, and become everything you are capable of becoming. And there is a divine principle in this. What you focus on expands. If you focus constantly on rejection, rejection becomes the story you tell yourself. If you focus on their silence, silence becomes your emotional environment. But if you focus on growth, purpose, discipline, gratitude, and faith, your internal world begins to change. Your circumstances may not change overnight, but you change the way you experience them. You stop asking why they left and start asking what this season is teaching you. You stop asking when they will return and start asking where you are going. You stop waiting for someone else's decision and start making decisions for yourself. That is where your power comes back. So don't become better to make someone regret losing you. Become better because your future deserves a better version of you. Don't become successful so someone from your past will look back. Become successful because there are dreams inside you that deserve to be lived. Don't heal so someone will notice your transformation. Heal because you deserve peace. And if one day they look at you and realize that your absence became the catalyst for your greatest transformation, let that be their realization. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to prove it. Your life will speak. Your peace will speak. Your discipline will speak. Your confidence will speak. Your new standards will speak. And perhaps the most powerful thing you will discover is that the person you were trying to make miss you is no longer the person you need to impress. You have moved beyond that. You have learned that real power is not controlling another person's emotions. Real power is mastering your own. So let them have their distance. Let them have their silence. Let them experience whatever their choices bring. And you. Build, heal, grow, rise, because the greatest revenge is not making someone regret losing you. The greatest victory is becoming so deeply aligned with your purpose that you no longer need anyone to regret leaving. What people refuse to feel does not always disappear. Sometimes it simply goes deeper. A person can push emotions aside, become busy, create distance, and convince themselves that they are completely fine. They can say, I don't care anymore, and even believe it for a while. But emotions are not erased simply because someone refuses to acknowledge them. What is buried can remain alive beneath the surface. That is why someone who appears cold may still carry memories they never processed. Someone can walk away and still remember your voice. They can act indifferent and still remember the way you made them feel. They can convince themselves that leaving was the right decision and still experience moments when the past suddenly returns. This is not necessarily a sign that they will come back. It is a reminder that human emotions are more complicated than appearances. Sometimes avoidance creates temporary relief. When emotional closeness becomes uncomfortable, creating distance can feel like freedom. There is less vulnerability, fewer difficult conversations, and less emotional pressure. A person may believe that if they stop talking about something, stop thinking about it, or stop being around the person connected to it, the emotion will eventually disappear. But avoidance and healing are not the same thing. Healing requires awareness. It requires honesty. It requires the courage to say, this affected me. And not everyone is ready for that. So they bury it. They move forward externally while carrying unfinished emotions internally. Then something unexpected happens. Time passes. The immediate intensity fades. The distractions become less effective. And one day, a memory appears without warning. A place, a song, a photograph, a familiar phrase, a quiet evening. Suddenly, something they thought they had buried comes back to the surface. That is when distance can become an emotional mirror. There is no longer another person standing in front of them to blame, avoid, or push away. There is only their own mind and the memories they carried with them. But listen carefully. Your responsibility is not to dig those emotions out of another person. You cannot heal someone else's avoidance for them. You cannot force emotional awareness. You cannot convince someone to confront feelings they are determined to escape, and trying to do so will only exhaust you. Your responsibility is to take care of your own emotional world. If they have buried something, let them face it in their own time. If they miss you, let them understand that feeling. If memories return, let them process them. If they realize they made mistakes, let them take responsibility. You do not need to become the emotional therapist for someone who refuses to communicate. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step away and allow another person to experience their own truth. And there is a deeper lesson here for you. Ask yourself what you are burying. Are you burying your own disappointment? Are you pretending you don't care because admitting that you cared feels too painful? Are you suppressing your anger? Are you avoiding the grief of what you hoped the relationship would become? Because healing does not mean pretending you were never hurt. Healing means allowing yourself to acknowledge the hurt without allowing it to define your future. You can say, yes, I miss them. You can say, yes, that relationship mattered. You can say, yes, I wanted it to work. And then you can still choose to move forward. That is emotional strength. You don't have to become cold to become strong. You don't have to stop caring to protect yourself. You simply need boundaries. You need self-respect. You need clarity. And you need faith that what is meant for your life will not require you to destroy your peace to maintain it. So if someone is distant, don't obsess over what they may be hiding. Don't spend every night trying to decode their silence. Let their journey belong to them. Your journey belongs to you. What they buried may eventually come back. What they avoided may eventually demand their attention. What they ignored may eventually become impossible to ignore. But when that happens, you want to be somewhere else emotionally. You want to be stronger. You want to be healed. You want to be living instead of waiting. Because the goal is not to sit around hoping someone finally feels what you wanted them to feel. The goal is to become so grounded in yourself that whether they confront their emotions tomorrow, next year, or never, you still continue becoming the person you were created to be. Let people face their truth, and you face yours. Because sometimes the greatest freedom comes when you stop trying to uncover what someone else has buried and finally begin healing what you buried inside yourself. There are seasons in life when you desperately want an answer. You want to know why someone walked away, why they became distant, why they stopped communicating, or why something that once felt so meaningful suddenly became uncertain. You want to know whether they will return, whether they miss you, and whether the story between you is truly finished. But sometimes the greatest lesson is learning that you do not need every answer before you can move forward. There is a timing to everything. And what feels like rejection today may become redirection tomorrow. When someone creates distance, your first instinct may be to fight against it. You want to close the gap immediately. You want to fix everything, explain everything, and somehow restore what existed before. But what if the distance is creating something you could not create while constantly chasing? What if this season is teaching you patience? What if it is teaching you boundaries? What if it is teaching you that your identity cannot depend on another person's attention? Sometimes life removes something from your hands because you were holding it so tightly that you could no longer receive anything new. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop trying to control the outcome. You can love someone and still release them. You can miss someone and still move forward. You can hope for reconciliation without putting your entire life on pause. That is faith. Faith is not knowing exactly what will happen. Faith is trusting that you will be guided through whatever happens. Maybe that person will return with greater maturity. Maybe they will eventually understand what they could not understand before. Maybe they will recognize the value of what they walked away from. But maybe the lesson is not about their return at all. Maybe the lesson is about your transformation. Maybe this separation is pushing you toward a version of yourself that would never have emerged if everything had remained comfortable. Sometimes discomfort becomes the doorway to growth. You discover strength because you had to stand alone. You discover discipline because nobody was there to motivate you. You discover self-respect because you finally became tired of begging for what should have been freely given. You discover purpose because you realize that one relationship cannot be your entire world. And this is where divine timing becomes powerful. You may want something now because you believe it will make you happy, but life may be preparing you for something deeper. You may think the answer is getting that person back, but perhaps the answer is becoming the person you need to be regardless of who comes back. You may think the greatest blessing is reconciliation, but sometimes the greatest blessing is peace. So stop forcing doors. Stop trying to manipulate outcomes. Stop believing that you must make someone miss you before your story can move forward. If something is truly meant to return, it will not need to be dragged back through fear and desperation. Let it return through clarity. Let it return through mutual effort. Let it return through changed behavior. And if it does not return, trust that your life is still moving towards something meaningful. Your future does not depend on one person's decision. Your purpose does not depend on whether someone chooses you. Your worth does not rise and fall according to someone's emotional availability. You are still here. You are still capable. You still have dreams. You still have gifts. You still have a life that deserves your full attention. So use this season. Don't waste it waiting. Build your self-ride. Learn. Work. Create. Pray. Reflect. Strengthen your character. Become disciplined with your time and intentional with your energy. And every morning, remind yourself, I do not need to know the entire path. I only need enough faith to take the next step. That next step may be difficult. Take it. That next season may be uncertain. Enter it. That old chapter may still hurt. Turn the page anyway, because sometimes God does not reveal the entire picture at once. Sometimes you receive only enough light to keep walking. And that is enough. If they return, let them meet a stronger version of you. If they don't, let the future meet a stronger version of you. Either way, you win when you refuse to stop growing. So trust the timing. Trust the process. Trust the lessons. Trust yourself. And trust that what belongs in your life will never require you to lose yourself just to keep it. You don't have to chase. You don't have to force. You don't have to beg. Keep walking. Keep becoming. Keep your heart open, but keep your standards strong. Because one day you may look back at this season and realize that what you thought was an ending was actually the beginning of your transformation. The distance was not your destruction. It was your invitation to grow. And the moment you accepted that invitation, you stopped waiting for someone else to choose you and started choosing the life you were meant to live.